Scarlet and Violet's first DLC, the Teal Mask, released very recently, and they've only added 7 new Pokemon. The thing is, a lot of these Pokemon look like they have a lot of potential. So I'm here to break down what each of these 7 new Pokemon do and how good you can expect them to be. Let's start off with Sinistcha. This is a new version of the Pokemon Sinistcha, but it's a little bit different in a number of ways. First, it has a brand new ability called Hospitality. You see, basically the way the ability works is when you switch in Sinistcha, it will heal its partner for a small amount of its HP. Now, I personally thought this would be something like 1/16 of a Pokemon's health, so you can imagine my surprise during a playthrough when Sinistcha switched in and healed my partner Skeledirge for 25% of his health.
Oh, huh?
This is a massive amount of healing, the equivalent of a citrus berry, which normally you would dedicate an entire item slot for. For this reason, Sinistcha starts off very strong, as I think that the ability alone makes it at least worth considering. Let's talk about the typing. Grass and Ghost isn't that desirable, at least on paper, because you get a lot of weaknesses without that many resistances, but I think that it's a lot better actually than it might look at first glance. Pokemon like Trevenant and Gourgeist have been good in past formats, and they share the exact same typing, and Brambleghast was actually pretty good this format as well. The thing is, even though you don't get that many resistances and you have a lot of weaknesses, you get 2 immunities to normal and fighting by virtue of being a ghost type. You're also immune to powder moves such as Spore and Rage Powder by virtue of being a grass type, and resistances to both ground and water are very valuable, especially with Pokemon like Landorus and Urshifu running around. Offensively, Ghost is great in hitting things for neutral damage, and Grass is a valuable type because it hits water types for super effective damage, and there aren't that many electric types right now. In terms of its stats, I think they look relatively well balanced. Sinistcha's overall bulk is not bad, though also not great. It's a little frail on the special side, but I would say it's pretty respectable on the physical side. Its special attack stat is actually quite good, and its speed stat leaves a little bit to be desired, but there are moves that it can run to help circumvent that a little bit. Speaking of moves, let's talk about that because its move pool is actually one of its bigger strengths. Starting off, it has a very fun new move that I personally love the name of called Matcha Gotcha. This is an 80 base power move with 90% accuracy that has 2 different effects. First, it's kind of like Giga Drain in that it heals the user for half of the damage dealt. Secondly, it also has the ability to burn. At the time I'm recording this, I don't know exactly how high the burn chance is, and I suspect it's likely to be something like 10% rather than 30%, and that'll be a big difference in terms of how good this move is, but even without knowing that, it's a very powerful move. 90% accuracy does feel a little risky, but I think overall it's not so bad that the move is worth not considering. But there is one more thing I should note. As of right now, I've heard some rumors that this move hits multiple targets, but I can't get a clear confirmed source on this. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure about that. It could be single target, it could hit both opponents, could also hit your partner as well. That doesn't seem very likely, but it is possible. In terms of damaging moves, it also gets stuff like Shadow Ball, Giga Drain, Leaf Storm, all classics and useful stab moves. Its coverage moves are pretty lacking, but in all honesty, its supporting and setup moves are both very, very good, so I think that you can justify not running that much coverage, especially because Shadow Ball is so good at hitting things for neutral damage. For setup moves, we have Calm Mind, Nasty Plot, and Iron Defense. Now, I don't really expect Sinistcha to be a setup Pokemon, in part because the ability really encourages you to switch out and in again, but these are worth considering, especially on specific teams. The really interesting thing, though, is the supporting moves. Sinistcha gets access to Rage Powder, which is an incredibly powerful move that redirects all of your opponent's attacks to the target. Between this and the healing from its Hospitality ability, it looks like Sinistcha can actually be really good at keeping its partner alive. It can also help keep itself alive, though, with one of the best healing moves in the game, Strength Sap. This is a move that heals the user for as much health as the target has attack stat, and then lowers that attack stat by 1. Because Sinistcha's HP isn't that high, this is in most scenarios going to heal it back to 100% of its health, and also lower the target's attack stat by 1. This can allow it to win certain 1v1 situations against physical attackers, and can also just help keep it alive in general, which is very useful because, again, every time it switches in, it heals the partner for 25%. Lastly, and this is actually pretty important, it gets access to Trick Room. Trick Room is one of the best ways of controlling the speed of a battle, and they're typically not super greedy with who they give it to, but they don't give it to every Pokemon that would be good with it. So the fact that Sinistcha gets it is a really big deal. Oh, there is one coverage move I forgot to mention, and that is Scald. Scald actually comes back to the game, which is exciting, but it has very limited distribution, but Sinistcha is one of the few Pokemon that gets it. It's a great move. I feel like in most situations, you'd prefer the supporting move pool of Sinistcha, along with the grass and ghost type attacks, but it is worth considering. Before we continue with the video, I want to take a second to just let you all know that I actually started a Patreon recently where I'm offering a lot of competitive, educational, and entertaining content. There's multiple bonus videos per month, as well as the ability to submit your teams for review and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. I don't want to take too much time, so you can check it all out yourself at patreon.com/WolfeyVGC, but I feel really good about the value that we're providing. So if you want more educational or entertaining content, recommend you at least check out the different tiers. Next, let's talk about Dipplin. This is a new evolution of Appleton that has a very interesting and unique ability. Super Sweet Syrup is a brand new ability that lowers the evasion of opponents' Pokemon the first time that Dipplin enters the battle. Lowering evasion is really interesting because there's a lot of really powerful moves that just don't have the most high accuracy. I mean, we've all lost games to moves like Draco Meteor and Rock Slide missing, and sometimes if you're unlucky, even an Icy Wind or a Snarl will miss and cost you a game. So being able to lower your opponent's evasion is actually, I think, a really interesting ability and not something that we've really had the chance to use before. This could also open up the possibility of using moves that are typically a little bit below the accuracy threshold that most players are comfortable using, such as Hypnosis. I think they would take it from around 60% accuracy to the mid 80s, if I'm not much mistaken. This could also be used to buff moves that are powerful but inconsistent, such as Bleakwind Storm, which is a really strong move but only has 80% accuracy. With this ability, you could ensure that your Bleakwind Storms at least have 100% accuracy of hitting the current targets on the field, which again is a really big deal. Dipplin's stats are a little bit on the whole, I'd say that they're pretty much average to below average across the board, and some of them are just bad. Its HP and special defense stats are, if they're okay, they're just barely okay, and the defense stat is good. It's like not great, but it's certainly not bad by any means. Special attack is pretty low, and then speed is very, very low, like extraordinarily low. I suspect that the reason that they made the stats this way is because the ability is very, very powerful, so they were trying to make sure that it wasn't too broken. Grass and Dragon typing is really interesting. I mean, it's not unique to the third Applin evolution, but it does give you a lot of really useful resistances. For example, Water, Grass, and Electric are both 4 times resisted since both Grass and Dragon resist them. So you can do a really good job of like switching into Urshifu, for example, or taking Thunderbolts or Leaf Storms or stuff like that. So you are 4 times weak to Ice, you're weak to Fairy. You also have weaknesses to Dragon and I think Bug and Flying, but the typing isn't going to be helping so much, but I also don't think it's going to be holding Dipplin back in a major way. So having talked about stats, abilities, and typing, let's talk about the move pool. To me, the most interesting thing is that Dipplin also gets a signature move called Syrup Bomb. This move only has 60 base power and it's only 85% accurate, and the reason why these are both relatively low, I would say, is because of the power of the secondary effect of the move. If you hit a Pokemon with Syrup Bomb, over the next 3 turns, its speed will decrease by 1 stage at the end of each turn. This isn't the most broken form of speed control we've ever seen, but it actually is really effective at slowing down one Pokemon. After those 3 turns are up and the effect has expired, the Pokemon's only 40% as fast as it would have been otherwise. I think this move will be especially potent towards the end of a game where the opponent either can't switch anymore or just has fewer resources for switching, because unlike Tailwind or Trick Room, which expire, stat drops at the end of the game are there until you switch out, and so if your opponent can't switch anymore, they can be stuck with a really slow Pokemon. An accuracy of 85% might make this move seem unreliable, especially with such a low base power, but keep in mind that whenever Dipplin switches in, it lowers the evasion of foes by 1, which makes this move 100% accurate. The rest of Dipplin's move pool, I would say, isn't amazing, but it's certainly not bad. Draco Meteor, Leaf Storm, and Giga Drain are all good damaging options, and their high base power will somewhat offset the fact that Dipplin's special attack stat is not great. Importantly though, Dipplin gets the move Pollen Puff, which can be used to heal up its partners as well as hit opposing Pokemon for some damage. My initial thought is a move pool of Syrup Trap, Pollen Puff, Draco Meteor, and then either Leaf Storm or Giga Drain while holding the Assault Vest item could be really interesting. With its good natural defense and the Assault Vest buffing up its special defense, I think this could make Dipplin a real actual presence in battles. It'll be difficult to get off the field quickly thanks to all this bulk investment, but if you ignore it, it can heal up its partners with Pollen Puff or slow down your attackers with Syrup Trap. With all that being said, my first impression is that this Pokemon probably won't be super good, but I do think that it has a lot going for it, and since we've never really seen an ability that affects the evasion of opponents' Pokemon before, I think that there's probably some interesting combos that aren't super apparent. Next on our list is a Pokemon that I didn't think would be getting any buffs because it is already immensely powerful, and that is Bloodmoon Ursaluna. Now, this is technically a different form of Ursaluna, and the stats are wildly different, but I am a little bit surprised that they gave a Pokemon as powerful as Ursaluna a different form that has so much going for it. But let's just start by talking about the ability, which is a brand new ability called Mind's Eye. This ability is basically 3 different abilities rolled into one. First, Bloodmoon Ursaluna will ignore changes to the opponent's evasion, which for the most part is probably irrelevant. People aren't really running moves like Minimize that much, but it will be good at shutting down certain strategies. Next, Mind's Eye also prevents Bloodmoon Ursaluna's accuracy from being lowered. This is great. I mean, it's not going to come up super often, but being hit by Muddy Water, having an accuracy drop on the same turn, and then missing a crucial move, like, really sucks. And so having like a Pokemon that's just immune to that secondary effect, it's nice. It's not like a huge deal, but it's certainly nice, and it will definitely like be appreciated in situations where your accuracy can get lowered. Lastly, and this is in my opinion the most useful part of the ability, it can hit ghost type Pokemon with both normal and fighting type moves. I don't know why they gave this Pokemon, which they already gave a bunch of other stuff to, 3 different effects in one new ability, but yeah, I mean, it's like not the most broken ability of all time just because the first 2 effects aren't going to be that common, but I mean, it's pretty strong across the board in terms of an ability. So normal and ground, same typing as regular Ursaluna. This is a good typing. It doesn't have that many weaknesses. Normal and ground are both really good types at hitting things for neutral damage. It also has a number of good Terra types, such as Ghost and Water, which just feel like they complement the natural typing very well. On the whole, they made Bloodmoon Ursaluna's stats a fair bit worse than regular Ursaluna. Normal Ursaluna has a very efficient stat spread. It has almost no base speed and almost no base special attack, and so the majority of its stat points are put in the other 4 stats, which are the most important. Bloodmoon Ursaluna has a little bit faster speed stat, but importantly, its attack stat is a whopping 25 points higher. This means that even though technically Bloodmoon Ursaluna has 5 more total stat points than regular Ursaluna, it ends up being worse statistically just because a lot of the stat points are locked in its attack stat, which it doesn't even want to use. While Ursaluna is a very powerful physical attacker, Bloodmoon Ursaluna is a special attacker. This means that it's probably going to play a different role than regular Ursaluna, and how good that is, we'll just have to wait and see. You know, it's kind of silly to talk about the stats being like worse because Ursaluna's stats are just out of this world incredible, so most Pokemon are going to look worse in comparison, at least statistically, if you compare it to Ursaluna. Instead of Headlong Rush, which is a very powerful move that lowers your defenses, most Bloodmoon Ursaluna are going to run Earth Power as their ground type move of choice. Interestingly though, they gave Bloodmoon Ursaluna a brand new, very, very powerful move called Blood Moon. This move is basically Hyper Beam without the recharge turn. It's 140 base power, which is again ridiculous, and the only drawback to using the move is that you can't use it 2 turns in a row. In my opinion, this drawback is very marginal, and so the fact that it has this good of a move that's a signature move that's a normal type, which is pretty good at hitting things for neutral damage, I would say, especially in combo with ground, who hits rock and steel types. This is an incredible move combination, especially given the very high special attack stat, especially given its ability means it can hit ghost types. One of the best counterplay to regular Ursaluna is to have a Pokemon that's immune to ground and a Pokemon that's immune to normal, such as Fluttermane, and then you can just kind of cycle between the two and make your opponent play a guessing game as to whether or not you're going to switch. With Bloodmoon Ursaluna, you can't really do that. Not only is ground super good at hitting things for like super effective or neutral damage, but you can't switch into Blood Moon without taking a ton of damage, at least not without resisting it most likely. Bloodmoon Ursaluna also gets, well, Moonblast, which isn't shocking. I don't know if this is worth using, but it might be worth considering at the very least with like a Terra Fairy, because Fairy is a good offensive type. It also gets Hyper Voice, which is a really consistent stab normal move that hits both targets without a drawback. So it has a lot going for it. Its move pool is pretty deep, and it does get Calm Mind, which is another option. You could run like a setup sweeper Bloodmoon Ursaluna, which is terrifying if you ask me. For the most part, I think you're going to be running Blood Moon, Earth Power, Protect, and then Hyper Voice, Terra Blast, Moonblast if you want, maybe a supporting move. It doesn't really have the room for it though. It is worth noting that part of the reason that Ursaluna is so powerful is because of its Guts ability. You can run Flame Orb, which not only makes it immune to other status conditions like sleep, but also powers it up by 50%. Bloodmoon Ursaluna doesn't have an equivalent of that, but its ability is really good. It lets it hit ghost types like I mentioned, and it can also hold a different item, whereas regular Ursaluna is kind of forced to run Flame Orb because of how strong Facade is when burnt and not really having a good alternative to that. I think it's a really powerful Pokemon. I think it probably wants to be used in Trick Room given how slow it is. I think it has a lot going for it. I think it's going to take players time to figure out how to use it in the most effective way, but I think it's really, really strong to say the least. Hey, just a quick reminder, most of my audience actually isn't subscribed to the channel at the moment, so if you're enjoying the content and you want more entertaining or educational content, maybe just see if you're subscribed. It helps the channel out a lot, and yeah, if you like the content, you might want to subscribe. Back to the rest of it. Okay, next up we're talking about, I think they're called the Loyal Trio. All 3 of these Pokemon have 2 abilities, one that is unique to each of them, and then one that is shared among the 3 of them being Toxic Chain. This ability has a chance to poison the target every time you hit it with any kind of move. So kind of like Poison Touch, but for all moves, not just contact moves. Okidogi's other ability is Guard Dog, which is shared with Stick. This ability prevents moves that would push the Pokemon out, such as Roar and Whirlwind, and they also give it an attack boost if it's ever intimidated specifically. So it's kind of like Worse Defiant that also prevents you from being switched out if you don't want to be. Its typing is Poison and Fighting, which is not great. You have a number of weaknesses, and you also have a 4x weakness to Psychic, which is a pretty big deal. Being weak to Ground as well is like not amazing. Flying is also a type that you don't really want to be weak to. So on top of that, Poison and Fighting don't have like amazing offensive synergy. Like one thing that comes to mind is that Ghost types wall both. And yeah, I mean, Poison's offensive typing in general just isn't great. Whereas Fighting, like it hits a lot of things for super effective, but there's also a fair few number of things that totally resist it. So it's not bad by any means, but it's also not like good. In terms of stats, I think that Okidogi has like the best distribution of the three. I would say it's got average HP and special defense, slightly on the lower end, but close to average, if not just average itself, and decent defense, like not amazing by any means, but also not terrible. A pretty good attack stat, 128 is, I would say, just actually a good attack stat, and a speed stat that is low, but not so low that it's unusable. Like its move pool is decent. It's not amazing by any means, but it has a couple good moves. It gets Close Combat, it gets Gunk Shot, Poison Jab, Taunt, Knockoff, High Horsepower, a number of good like coverage moves. It could be used as an Assault Vest set. It could be used as probably not a Focus Sash set. You could probably Scarf it if you wanted. Overall, I think it's going to be using probably Close Combat, Poison Jab, or Gunk Shot, depending on if you are risk averse or risk tolerant. Maybe Knockoff. It's good to hit Ghost types, which obviously resist the other two moves. And then maybe a coverage move like High Horsepower if you want to Assault Vest. And then maybe like Protect if you want to run a different item like Citrus Berry or Shuka Berry or something. I don't think it's, you know, amazing by any means, but I also don't think it's like so bad either. I think it's probably like, I would rank it as like a below average Pokemon, but whenever you get a new Pokemon, especially one that like, you know, you don't really have any kind of context for with an ability that you don't fully understand, it's hard to say for sure, but I wouldn't expect this thing to be great, but it might have a need, basically what I'm trying to say. Okay, next up we have Munkidori. I said that each of these poison dudes has like one unique ability and one shared ability. Munkidori basically only has one ability, at least if you're playing competitively in tournament. Second ability is Frisk, which like reveals the held items of the opponent's Pokemon. However, like we in tournaments play a format called Open Team Sheet where the items of our opponents are shared in advance. Yeah, but Toxic Chain is a good ability, so it's not like it's a bad thing by any means. Munkidori is Poison and Psychic type, which is an okay combination, I guess. Defensively, you only have 3 weaknesses to Ground, Ghost, and Dark, and that's a relatively small number of weaknesses. However, you also don't have that many resistances. And while Fairy is useful and Grass is somewhat useful, Poison isn't super common, and Fighting, like, I don't know, maybe it'll be more common after the DLC, but like it's definitely not that important, especially because almost every fighting Pokemon that has fighting moves will also have other coverage moves as well, like Urshifu having Rapid Strike, Surging Strikes or Weak Blow, and Iron Hands having Wild Charge, and even Heavy Slam, I bet, does a decent chunk of damage. So offensively, you only get 4 types for super effective, being Fighting, Grass, Fairy, and Poison. And there is one type that neither of Poison nor Psychic can hit for super effective damage, being Steel. In terms of the stats, it's probably not good enough, but it has some stuff going for it. It's got average to slightly below average special bulk, and its physical bulk is pretty low, but not so low that it's going to be, you know, one-shot by everything. The special attack stat is actually quite high, which gives me like hope for it, but its speed 106 used to be really, really fast, like, you know, before power creep and everything. There used to be that things were basically balanced around base 100, but we have like Fluttermane and Chen Pao right now, and so being weak to both of those Pokemon and being slower than both those Pokemon makes me really worried for Munkidori. It has basically no coverage moves. It gets like Psychic and Psyshock and Sludge Bomb and Sludge Wave, but in terms of like non-poison or psychic moves, is he Grass Knot? That's kind of it, folks. In terms of damaging moves, you can use Focus Blast if you want to miss. I mean, maybe with Dipplin, I don't know. Maybe Focus Blast is better. It does have some good setup moves, specifically Nasty Plot and Calm Mind. I think Nasty Plot's typically going to be better because it's so frail anyway, but it does get Calm Mind. In terms of support moves, it gets Fake Out, which is a good move, don't get me wrong, but it's so frail that like typically Fake Out Pokemon are best when they're a little bit bulkier, so they can switch in and out a couple times. It gets like Helping Hand, though it's not a great Helping Hand user. It gets Parting Shot. I don't think this is a Pokemon that really wants to switch in and out that much because it's so frail, but it does get it. On the whole, I think this thing is actually pretty disappointing. It doesn't look very good to me at all. I think if you want to have success with it, my advice would be Protect, Psychic, Sludge Bomb, Nasty Plot, or Fake Out over Nasty Plot. You run the Toxic Chain ability, and you basically use it as a fast special attacker that you need multiple hits to clear. I don't think it will be very good because I mean, it's so frail that like if you're running Focus Sash, like yes, you can survive 2 hits, but then you run into Flutter Mane, which is Dazzling Gleam, breaking the Sash, and then any partner can kind of clean you up. So not to mention Urshifu Rapid Strike being able to kind of KO Pokemon around Focus Sash. I think that it's a Pokemon that like maybe some people will find success with, but really most of the time you're going to be doing most of the work rather than the Pokemon doing most of the work for you. Which leaves us with just one more member of the loyal 3 left. Fezandipiti, which shockingly is not a flying type Pokemon, but is instead a fairy and poison type Pokemon. Technician powers up moves with a base power of less than 60 by 50%. So a move that would have 60 base power would increase to 90. This is a good ability, but I think that on Fezandipiti, Toxic Chain is probably going to be better, but I could be wrong about that. Poison and Fairy is the best of the 3, at least in my opinion, for a number of reasons. Defensively, you only have 3 weaknesses: to Ground, Psychic, and Steel. In terms of resistances, you have 5: to Grass, Dark, Fairy, Fighting, and Bug, on top of an immunity to Dragon. Offensively, you hit 5 types for super effective damage, being Fighting, Grass, Dark, Dragon, and Fairy. Of course, both Poison and Steel types resist both Fairy and Poison type attacks, so that's not great. In terms of the stats, they're a little bit strange. The HP and defense are both average, slightly below average, but the special defense is actually quite good. Both the attack and the special attack stats, though, are pretty low, to the point where it's going to be difficult to get this Pokemon to do damage. And the speed stat isn't really much to write home about. It's base 99, which is, it's not so bad, but it's like, especially in how fast the format is right now, it's not so good. That being said, I do still think that this is the best member of the 3, and part of the reason has to do with its move pool. Whereas the other 2 of the loyal trio, both obviously are geared towards being attackers, with one being a slower and bulkier physical attacker, the other being a faster and frailer special attacker, Fezandipiti is really guided more towards being a support Pokemon. It has a number of good moves that don't do damage or do just a little bit of damage in favor of supporting its team, such as Roost, Charm, Acid Spray, Icy Wind, Light Screen, Haunt, but there's one move in particular I want to focus on: Tailwind. Now, Tailwind is an incredible attack that doubles your team's speeds for the next 4 turns. Fezandipiti learning Tailwind is a big deal, since it's a way that it can support its team and take advantage of its high natural bulk, where you could protect a partner, tank a hit with Fezandipiti, and then go for Tailwind. On top of that, its access to the move Icy Wind is really interesting, because not only is Icy Wind another form of speed control that can help against Tailwind teams, it also gives you the ability to potentially poison both of your opponent's Pokemon. Something like Tailwind, Roost, Icy Wind, and Dazzling Gleam, which, although it's not a super powerful attack, is also a spread move that hits both your opponent's Pokemon, could be really interesting. I think with a set like this, you could allow Fezandipiti to be a really annoying Pokemon because it's super tanky, and if you give it Roost, it can stick around for a while, so it's not really like always great to invest attacks into the bulky Pokemon. Like oftentimes you want to focus on the partners, but at the same time, if you ignore it, you give it multiple chances to not only lower your speed stat, which is a big deal, but to badly poison your Pokemon, which then it becomes a real problem because Fezandipiti is actually applying a lot of pressure, because badly poisoned Pokemon, they're on a timer, and once that timer runs out, they faint, but also Fezandipiti is super tanky. It gets access to a number of good flying type moves like Hurricane and Brave Bird and Acrobatics. It also gets Play Rough, which is a really good move given that its physical attack is higher. I still think it might be worth considering Dazzling Gleam because of Toxic Chain, but Play Rough is going to do more damage on average. It also gets some interesting setup moves like Calm Mind, Nasty Plot, and Swords Dance. I don't think these moves are like incredible by any means, but I do think that they are interesting and yeah, at the very least are worth considering if you don't want to run the Tailwind set. Basically, I think that Fezandipiti is the best suited to take advantage of Toxic Chain, and although I don't think it's like a surefire like, oh, this is a Pokemon is amazing, I think that it has some interesting things that it can do given how bulky it is and given the potency of its ability. Which just leaves us with our final and, in my opinion, most interesting Pokemon, Ogerpon. Basically, Ogerpon's typing and ability change depending on what its held item is. First, it has 4 different typings depending on which mask it's holding. If it isn't holding a mask at all, it gets the pure grass typing, and it's a grass Terra type when it terastallizes. If it's holding the fire, water, or rock type mask, it gets a grass plus fire, water, or rock type, and it also gets a different ability when it terastallizes. The terrestrial abilities are easy enough to understand. If it's a grass type when it terastallizes, it gets a speed boost. If it's a fire type, attack boost, water type, special defense boost, rock type, defense boost. Its abilities also change depending on which mask it's holding, even when it doesn't terastallize, with it being Defiant as a grass type, Water Absorb as a grass and water type, Mold Breaker if it's holding the fire mask, and Sturdy if it's a rock type. The pure grass type is interesting just because it's a speed boost, which is very, very valuable. We're gonna get to this later, but its base speed is like high but not faster than Flutter Mane or Chen Pao, so by getting the speed boost, you do have the ability to outspeed Pokemon like Chen Pao and Flutter Mane, very valuable. The attack boosting one is interesting as well. I think that grass and fire is a really interesting type combination that we haven't really ever gotten to see play out because Scovillain just is really bad. And the attack boost is nice. If you have some kind of speed control with this thing, like +1 attack, plus fire and grass coverage sounds, at least to me, to be very, very powerful. The water one is interesting as well. I think that the boost that you get as a water type being special defense is not quite as good, but grass and water is really nice typing. It can be more like useful on a rain team. It can be useful just in general. It's like nice typing. You don't have that many weaknesses. Grass resists both of water's base weaknesses, being grass and electric. So, and water absorb is a really good ability. Like you could run like water mask and then have it be pretty tanky with a special defense boost in Terraform, and you could also heal it up with surf outside of that. So that's interesting. Not to mention getting a power boost on your water type attacks. The rock one is the one that I'm personally the least interested in. Rock is just, in a vacuum, it's a worse type than both fire and water, and its defense boost is in general less valuable because you can lower your opponent's attack stats with Intimidate. So I could probably talk a lot more about each of these Pokemon, each of these forms individually, but for the sake of not giving everyone a headache, let's just talk about the stats because those at least do not change based on the form. The bulk isn't bad. It's got 80 HP, 84 defense, 96 special defense. Totally respectable. Not the bulkiest Pokemon you've ever seen. If it takes a super effective attack from a strong attacker, it's probably going down, but it's not bad at all, especially given that one of these stats when you Terra will be boosted. So its attack stat is base 120, which is pretty high. I mean, it's not the highest we've ever seen, and we've kind of been spoiled with super high attack stat Pokemon, but it's certainly not bad by any means. I would say it's good, not great. And the speed stat is a very respectable 110. Again, this isn't getting above the Fluttermane and the Chen Paos of the world, but it's probably for the best for the format in general. I would say you don't really want that many more Pokemon that are so fast. So 110 is going to make you faster than most Pokemon. If they don't have speed control, there's not that many Pokemon above it. And so, especially if you have a way to increase your speed with like Tailwind or the speed boosting from the Grass Terra, I think this is a pretty good speed stat. So across the board, stats are good. I would say these are good, well-balanced stats. They don't seem broken, but they certainly don't seem bad. Let's look at the moves. It gets a signature move called Ivy Cudgel. This is 100 base power, 100 accuracy, so already really good, that changes type depending on the mask. So if you have the fire mask, fire type, water mask, water type. This is great. First of all, it's the best rock type attack they've ever made. Rock type attacks are always inaccurate for some reason. So having 100 base power that never misses, great. If for some reason you really need like rock type coverage on a team and you don't want to like risk, I don't know, like a slow bulky rock type, or you don't want to miss rock slide missing, like this is a great option for you. And the fact that it's customizable depending on your mask, also awesome. I think this is really good. If you're running Ivy Cudgel with a mask, you are going to need a different grass type attack, which is okay because it gets two very good grass type physical attacks, being Wood Hammer and Horn Leech, with Wood Hammer being stronger and having recoil, and then Horn Leech being weaker but having recovery. Knockoff, U-turn, Play Rough, Stomping Tantrum, these are all really good moves. Close Combat, then Headbutt, Brick Break. In terms of supporting moves, first of all, it gets Spiky Shield, which is great. This is just a better version of Protect that damages the attacker if they make contact with it. So most notably is Follow Me, one of the best moves ever created. Follow Me is a staple, not even Rage Powder, which is grass type Follow Me. They just gave it straight up Follow Me. This is a very powerful move. It's great at supporting the team, and it can be used even on offensive Pokemon to allow it to serve both an offensive and a supporting role. We actually don't have that many offensive Pokemon that also learn Follow Me because Follow Me is so strong that the distribution is kept pretty limited on purpose. It also gets supporting moves like Helping Hand and Taunt. I think that it's not best suited for those moves just because like it is an offensive Pokemon that's meant to be doing damage, but Follow Me is so good that it can be an exception. Lastly, it gets one setup move that I think is worth noting, and that is Swords Dance. Swords Dance is a very powerful move that doubles the user's attack stat, or technically it gives it +2 stages of attack, but if you can buy a turn with it, I think that it could actually be really powerful. Something like Water type with like Water Absorb, Swords Dance, Horn Leech, Ivy Cudgel, Spiky Shield, great set, hard to take down. You can run some bulk on it because you're doubling your attack stat. Ivy Cudgel going to be doing a ton of damage. You can do this with the grass type mask as well, where maybe you run like Knockoff and Horn Leech, or maybe you run Wood Hammer and Close Combat or Play Rough or something. You can pick based on your kind of like preferences, where now you get +1 speed when you terrestrialize via your ability, and you also get the attack boost from Swords Dance. So and you're doing a ton of damage because you're a grass type, and you can have Horn Leech, so you're healing a bunch. So I think there's a number of interesting options you can do with Swords Dance. I think if you're running this thing, you always want Ivy Cudgel. You probably want Spiky Shield. If you're not running the grass form, you're going to want a grass move on this thing. And then 2 coverage moves or setup moves. Like I think that like Follow Me plus Knockoff sounds good. I think that Swords Dance plus Horn Leech plus Ivy Cudgel sounds good if you're running like water or even fire maybe. I think this thing is strong. I think that it looks good. I'm excited to use it. I think that it's a cool Pokemon. I don't know if it'll be game breaking, but I think that there's a lot of really interesting things you can do with it, especially given it has Follow Me. I didn't even mention you could run a bulky set. You don't even need to invest fully in your offense. You could run like the water one, great defensive typing, and run like Follow Me, Synthesis, Spiky Shield, Ivy Cudgeler, or something. Those are the 7 new Pokemon that they add in the DLC. I actually talked for a lot longer than I intended to, so hopefully you all enjoyed this. I think that's it for me. Let me know which one's your favorite. Let me know which one you're most excited to try. Let me know if you think I missed anything. And yeah, thank you for watching. Bye bye.